It was a Friday evening in early autumn, and I was not expecting anyone at all when I heard the sound of tires turning slowly into my lane. I remember I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a single teacup, watching the light go gold and long across the garden. And I thought, at first, that it must be someone turning the car around, the way people sometimes do at the end of my lane when they've taken the wrong turning off the main road. But the engine did not turn around and drive away. It came closer, gravel crunching soft and slow, and then it stopped right there by my gate. My poor old garden gate, the one that had sagged on its hinges for 2 winters now, and dragged its corner through the dirt every time I opened it. I dried my hands on my apron and went to the window. And there, climbing out of a dusty little car with a travel mug in one hand and his hair all ruffled from the drive, was my grandson. My Ben, 19 years old, 3 hours away at his university, and standing in my garden on a Friday evening as if he had simply fallen out of the sky. I opened the front door before he could even knock, and he looked up at me, a little sheepish, a little tired around the eyes, and he grinned that grin he has had since he was small, and he said, "Hi, Gran. I hope it's all right. I came to fix your gate." I stood there in the doorway with my dishcloth still in my hand, and I did not know what to say, because I had mentioned the gate to him only once, weeks before, on the telephone, in passing, the way you mention small troubles you have no real intention of fixing. And he had remembered. He had remembered, and he had driven 3 hours through the Friday traffic just to mend a thing I had almost stopped noticing. But all of that can wait until the morning, because right now, none of it needs anything from you. Not the gate, not the drive, not the long week behind you. Right now, there is only your warm bed and the soft dark of your room and the slow, steady rise and fall of your own breathing. So let yourself settle. Let the pillow take the whole weight of your head. Let your shoulders sink down, away from your ears, and let your hands grow heavy and warm at your sides. I'm going to tell you the rest of this story slowly and softly from the beginning. There is nothing for you to do but listen and drift and let yourself be carried gently down into sleep. Let me begin. My name doesn't matter very much for a story like this. I am 68 years old, and I live alone now in a small brick cottage at the edge of a village, with a garden that is far too big for one pair of hands and far too dear to me to ever give up. My husband, George, planted most of that garden. He has been gone 4 years now. He was the one who dug the beds and trained the roses along the fence, and he was the one, years ago, who hung the garden gate himself one Saturday afternoon, whistling the whole time and getting it very slightly crooked, which he always swore was on purpose, so that it would swing shut on its own. For a long time it did swing shut on its own. And then, the way things do, it grew tired. The wood swelled in the wet winters. The hinges loosened. The bottom corner began to droop and scrape a little groove in the path, so that I had to lift it, just so, with a particular tug I had learned without ever meaning to learn it. I never fixed it, partly because I did not quite know how, and partly, if I am honest with you, because George's hands had hung it, and mending it felt a little like painting over his handwriting. So I simply lived with it, the way you live with all the small, sagging things when there is no one left to notice them but you. Now take a slow breath with me. In through the nose, gently, and out like a long sigh at the end of a long day, letting your whole body grow a little heavier against the bed. There is no hurry in this story. We are simply going to follow it, the way you might follow a quiet path through a garden at dusk, in no rush at all to reach the end. I made Ben a pot of tea that first evening, and I found the end of a fruitcake in the tin, and we sat at the kitchen table while the sky went from gold to violet to a soft and starry dark. He told me about his term, about the flat he shared with 3 other boys, and the burnt saucepans, and the girl in his history seminar he did not quite have the courage to speak to yet. He talked, and I listened, and I poured the tea, and I felt something in my chest that I had not felt in a good long while. A kind of fullness, the particular warmth of having someone to keep the kettle busy for. At some point I said to him, gently, Ben, love, you didn't have to come all this way. It's only a gate. And he was quiet for a moment, turning his mug round in his hands, and then he said, I know, but you sounded like you'd got used to it being broken. And I didn't want you getting used to broken things. I looked at that boy, my daughter's son, who I had held when he was an hour old, and I had to busy myself with the teapot so he would not see my eyes go bright. Let your eyes close now, if they haven't already. There is nothing more you need to see, just my voice and the quiet and the slow unspooling of the story. He slept that night in the little back bedroom, the one that was my daughter's once, with the sloping ceiling and the window that looks out over the garden. I lay awake a while in my own room, listening to the old house settle and to the small, unfamiliar sound of another person breathing under my roof, and I felt safer than I had felt in 4 years. In the morning, the mist was still lying low over the garden when I heard him already out there, moving about. I made 2 cups of tea, out of a habit I had never quite broken, and this time, for the first time in a long time, both cups were wanted. I carried them out into the cool gray morning, and there was Ben crouched down by the gate in George's old canvas coat that he had found on the hook by the door, studying the sagging hinge as if it were the most interesting problem in the world. "It's not so bad," he said, taking the tea. "The wood's sound. It's just dropped. I'll take it off, plane the bottom, put some new screws in the hinges, have it swinging like new by lunchtime." He said it so simply, as if the things that droop and stick and wear away could just be lifted off and mended and hung back straight, as if it were the easiest thing in the world to undo 2 winters of quiet neglect. We worked together all that morning. Or rather, he worked, and I held things and passed things and fetched the oil, and mostly just stood near him in the damp garden with my hands wrapped round my cup, watching my grandson do a thing his grandfather used to do. Breathe in now, slow and soft, and out even slower. Feel how heavy your arms have become, how warm. Feel the bed holding you completely so that you don't have to hold yourself up at all. He found George's old toolbox in the shed, under a fall of cobwebs, exactly where it had sat for 4 years. And when he opened it, the smell came up out of it, oil and sawdust and cold metal. And it was so completely, so exactly the smell of George that I had to sit down for a moment on the upturned bucket by the shed door. Ben noticed. He always notices, that boy. He didn't say anything clumsy. He just came and sat beside me on the step and bumped his shoulder gently against mine, the way George used to, and we sat there together for a little while in the quiet. And then, when I was ready, we carried on. He lifted the gate off its hinges. It was lighter than either of us expected, once it was free, and he carried it over to the old workbench and set it across 2 trestles. And he showed me the corner that had been dragging, the wood worn pale and soft where it had rubbed against the path for 2 whole years. "See," he said, running his thumb along it. "It's been fighting the ground this whole time. No wonder it was tired." I thought about that as he set to work with the plain, long, smooth strokes, curls of pale wood dropping into the wet grass. I thought about how a thing can spend so long fighting the ground it rests on that it wears itself down without anyone quite seeing it happen. And I thought, perhaps, that he was not only talking about the gate, but I did not say so. Some things are better left to hang gently in the air between people, unspoken, like the scent of the roses. Let yourself drift now. You don't need to follow every word. Let them wash over you like warm water, like the sound of rain on a roof when you are safe and dry beneath it. By the middle of the day, the sun had come through, and the mist had lifted off the beds, and the whole garden was steaming faintly and smelling of wet earth and and late roses. Ben planed and sanded and screwed in the new brass hinges I hadn't even known we had, until the gate was straight and true again. And then he called me over to hang it. He held it up in place, and I was to guide the pin down into the hinge, and my hands were not as steady as they once were, but between us we managed it, his strong young hands and my old careful ones, and the pin slid home with a small and satisfying click. He stepped back. He swung the gate open and let it go, and it swung shut on its own, all by itself, slow and smooth and certain, the way it had not done in years, the way George had made it do all those Saturdays ago. It clicked shut against the post, gentle as a sigh. I put my hand to my mouth. I don't mind telling you. I stood there in my own front garden and watched a gate close by itself, and I wept, just a little, the good kind, the kind that comes when something you thought was lost turns out only to have been waiting. Ben put his arm around me. He smelled of sawdust and cut grass and George's old coat. And he said softly, "Good as new, Gran." And I said, "Better," because it was. Now take another slow breath with me. In through the nose, and out long and soft, letting the day drain out of you completely, letting yourself grow heavier and warmer and more still. We did not stop at the gate. That was the loveliest part, really. Once it was mended, Ben looked around at the rest of the garden, at the beds gone leggy, and the roses that wanted tying in, and the bench with the loose slat, and he said, "Well, I'm here now. What else can I do?" So we spent the whole of that golden afternoon pottering, the two of us, side by side. He tied in the roses while I deadheaded them. He tightened the slat on George's bench so it did not wobble any more. We cleared the leaves from the little pond, and we cut back the lavender, and we filled 3 whole barrows with the tired old growth of a summer that was quietly ending. And we talked, the way you can only talk when your hands are busy and your eyes are on the work and not on each other. He told me things I do not think he had told anyone, about being a little lonely sometimes, so far from home, about missing his grandfather more than he let on, about how, some evenings in that noisy shared flat, he thought about this garden and this quiet and me, and it steadied him to know it was all still here. And I told him things too. I told him how the silence had been these 4 years. Not a bad silence always, but a wide one. I told him how I sometimes set out 2 cups still, out of habit, and he did not think it was foolish. He said he was glad. He said, "That means there's always one ready for me." Let your eyes stay closed and your breathing slow. There is nothing you need to carry now. No gate to lift, no garden to tend, no silence to fill. just the warm dark and the next soft word and the next. We had our supper out in the garden that evening, on George's mended bench, with plates on our knees and a blanket over our shoulders because the air had turned cool. The new gate stood straight at the end of the path, catching the last of the light. And every so often, I confess, I got up just to open it and let it swing shut again, only to watch it close on its own, only to hear that small and certain click. Ben laughed at me, but he understood. Of course he understood. That was the whole of why he'd come. He stayed until Sunday evening. We went to the village on the Saturday, and he carried my bag, and we bought too much cake. On the Sunday morning, we walked the long way round the fields slowly, at my pace, and he did not once hurry me. And all the while, going in and out through that garden gate, it swung shut behind us, easy and sure, like a small promise being kept over and over again. And when at last he loaded his dusty little car to drive the 3 hours home, and I stood at the gate to see him off, he hugged me for a long time, longer than boys of 19 usually do. And he said, "I'll come back soon, Gran, and I'll bring my tools. There's always something needs doing." I watched his taillights go down the lane and turn out onto the road. And then I stood a while longer in the quiet, with my hand resting on the top of the gate. And it did not sag under my hand anymore. It stood straight and strong and true, mended by a boy who had driven 3 hours because he did not want me getting used to broken things. Stay with me now, here in the warm. You are almost at the end, and the end is the softest part of all. I have thought about that weekend a great deal in the months since, about how small it was, really. A mended gate, a garden tidied, 2 days of pottering and tea and talk. And yet, how it has stayed with me, warm as a stone kept in a pocket, all through the cold that came after. Because I think what he mended that weekend was never really the gate at all. I think he mended something in me that had grown tired of scraping along the ground. He reminded me that I was still remembered, that in a noisy flat 3 hours away, a boy carried the thought of me around like something precious. That love does not always arrive with grand words or great occasions. Sometimes it arrives on a Friday evening in a dusty car with a travel mug and a toolbox, and it simply asks, "What can I do?" And that, I have come to believe, is the truest kind there is. Not the love that says beautiful things, the love that drives 3 hours and rolls up its sleeves and mends the small sagging thing you had almost stopped believing could be mended at all. So let that be the last thought you carry down into sleep. A garden gate hung straight again, swinging slowly shut all by itself in the golden evening light. A small and certain click. a thing you thought was lost, only waiting all along to be set right. Let it go now, all of it. The long week, the tired day, everything you had to hold. Let it dissolve like sugar in warm tea. You have nothing to mend tonight. No gate to lift, no burden to carry, no silence to fill. There is only the warmth of your bed, and the soft dark, and the slow tide of your own breathing carrying you gently out. Breathe in slow and easy, and out slower still. You are safe. You are warm. You are exactly where you are meant to be. Let the next breath be gentler than the last, and the one after gentler still. Rest now, sleep now. I will keep the kettle warm, and the light on in the window, and the gate swinging easy on its hinges. And I will be here, telling quiet stories, whenever you need somewhere gentle to go. Good night,